Coogs house. We understand that college sports and the college landscape are changing, but how much changing is far fetched, including in the Big 12? Let's cut through some of it today at Locked On Cougs.
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Appreciate you making the first listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. If you want to join the conversation but you don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below if you like crushed iced or cubed ice today. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. More on that fun later. Fun trivia at the end of each episode today, so make sure to stay tuned for that. But I want to talk in the first segment here about more of this realignment stuff that's going on. Some stuff circulating the internet, and we need to address that and how it impacts Houston potentially. We do have an exhibition hoops game on the schedule, so I want to get into that some as well as the countdown to Houston Cougar basketball begins. And I also want to spend a segment at the end talking about if we should be celebrating other Big 12 things, even if it's rivals and opponents. But first, the big news in realignment this week came from an account called Inside the Big 12. And for what it's worth, I think the reason this account has credence to it, right, is because Inside the Big 12 has been correct early and accurate and all that previous times, right? They've earned people following them for information on this kind of stuff for whatever reason. They were right on Texas and Oklahoma. They're right on the corner schools. They're right on the Houston, UCF, BYU, and Cincinnati train. They've been right, and so people have been kind of saying, oh, maybe they know what they're talking about. Anyway, Inside the Big 12 points out, as we've said several times on here, the ACC is kind of set up to fall in 2030. That part we understood and knew pretty consensusly. The buyout drops each year until 2030, and so theoretically that's as cheap as it's going to get. And the Big 12 would be starting a new media rights deal the summer of 2031. So you'd be leaving the ACC to join the Big 12, and then you'd be bolstering the Big 12 right before their new media deal and getting out of the ACC 5 or 6 years before their bad one expires. So you kind of want to be timing that up perfectly. And Inside the Big 12 says that I should say, I think it's a he, but based on the profile picture. But I know for a fact that the Big 12 schools have spoken to 4 ACC schools recently and goes on to vague details about the different topics they have talked about, like at a lunchtime meeting, and about what kind of exit fees they were talking about and what kind of portion the Big 12 would pay and whatever, right? That is interesting. I didn't mention specifically who, although then there was some hypothesizing and comments and replies and back and forth on who it was. Your Louisvilles, your Pittsburghs, your Virginia Techs, the kind of schools we talk about a lot as being potential options for good Big 12 schools. New territory, expanding eastward, finding close to major markets or whatever, right? Those kinds of things. The interesting thing the person also said was that they thought West Virginia was a prime candidate to go to the SEC amongst all of this realignment. And I think that had people saying, like, what? As Houston, who even in the rebuilding era we're in right now, which, again, is going quicker than I thought it would, even in that rebuilding era that we're in right now, though, people are like, why would you ever take West Virginia over Houston, right? Or several other Big 12 options. And I want to point out, before we get to why that doesn't make any sense, why West Virginia would not make sense. West Virginia does have like a long, illustrious history, like a 1922 national title in there, and all that kind of stuff. It does add a state, and when you're the SEC and you have the SEC network, I know cable packages are kind of a thing in the past. They're not completely gone yet. Adding states is important. They're the marquee football program in that state. And adding a state, however big or small, is an important deal because that means suddenly people in that state will want to carry your package, your SEC network or whatever. That's the inside scoop as to why they want to add like a North Carolina or to adding other states to their resume. The one thing I think they did realize in that is that not every state is the same. When they got A&M 15 years ago, A&M did not carry the state. While it's a gigantic brand, as just Texas is too big, they needed to add UT in that as well. And then they took Oklahoma to do kind of the same thing, but you're trying to get people to have a gigantic, brand in that state. So then that state wants to get your TV package. Look, I get why West Virginia is adding that. I get why it has that history with highs, right? It has some, like over 40 something All-Americans and all that kind of like it's a weird history to think of because you don't think of Pat White and Steve Slayton as being like a consistent thing. We don't think of the Big East success as being a consistent thing because it was so long ago, and there haven't been that many West Virginia highs in the Big 12 itself. Frankly, I'd argue that Houston beating them in 2023 was kind of like, haha, see, we're not the bottom of the Big 12 that people thought we were kind of moment. They also, for what it's worth, whatever you thought about Dane Holgorsen, Houston took him from West Virginia when Houston was a Group of Five program, right? Like that is, I think, worth saying as well. But it does sound like West Virginia, when looking to find a new conference in 2011, got a list of things from the SEC they needed to do. They've done those over the last 15 years, by and large, as far as the concrete things you can do. I don't know. I think that this is worth pointing out, too, though, that inside the Big 12, in their profile picture has a West Virginia shirt on there, a West Virginia person. They're not apologetic about that. This feels more hopeful than anything. The SEC and the Big Ten might fight for Carolina, Duke, Virginia, schools and states they don't have because those TV network deals and those kind of things. I don't think the Big 12 is going to lose a West Virginia in realignment. Now, if you want to talk to me about Tech, because Tech is spending this money, and in 5 years, what does that look like? Maybe. Do I think for selfish reasons, Houston would be a good add to one of them? Could the Big Ten benefit from dipping into the state of Texas? Yes, we can do those episodes later. But I think that the interesting thing here is actually more the SEC is still interested in Florida State and Clemson theoretically, even though they have Florida and have South Carolina. Those are national brands that can put them in parts of the world they don't necessarily have a foothold in because they have such national cachet. I don't see this West Virginia thing happening. And I'm not saying that to belittle, like it can never happen. I would have thought other things could never happen that have happened. But simply put, I don't think Houston's got to worry about the Big 12 starting to lose a lot more schools all of a sudden. Again, Tech is a big spender, and I guess that would be one potential candidate because they're spending like a big boy or whatever right now. And if it translates to winning, you may see them try to be absorbed by one of these other conferences because they tend to do that, or tend to want to do that. But they also, for what it's worth, as conferences are kind of upset that Tech is rocking the boat, and we'll talk about that in the third segment. But I think there's a lot of smoke around a lot of this, and the focus has moved off of the ACC falling apart in 2030 conversation that schools have been talking to the Big 12 conversation because of how outlandish the West Virginia claim was, right? And with that being so outlandish, it just has kind of, I think, moved the spotlight or shifted where we're talking about this. And honestly, I wish it hadn't, because I think that bit about the ACC has schools that are communicating currently with the Big 12 about a 2030 move is interesting, because that's how Texas, Oklahoma to the SEC happened, right? Was conversations were had behind closed doors over things like lunch very quickly, and then it just happened in an instant, right? It was boom, we're out of here, and we're leaving. We're giving you 24 months head notice or heads up or whatever, and we're out of here, right? That is how these things happen. Is they get talked about behind closed doors. People online like this inside the Big 12 person get told they're crazy for about 16 months or whatever, and then all of a sudden it just happens. and it's just like, oh my God, I can't believe that just happened. And that's where I think the focus of this should be, is that the Big 12 is actually going to be adding some teams. I also know that it makes any sense if you're a West Virginia and we're shrinking from a Power 4 to a Power 3 conference. The Big 12 would be adding a bunch of schools kind of with the intention of having West Virginia there, the Pittsburgh, the Louisville, maybe a Virginia Tech or other schools in that region. That would all be theoretically with the intent of having West Virginia there. So I just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to me. I know I'm a history teacher. I shouldn't poo-poo the history that West Virginia's got, but history for them does feel like a long time. I know Houston plays them this year, so I'm going to jinx it, whatever. But it feels like a long time ago, and so I just don't get it. Now, I want to talk about something I do get, and that is Houston Cougar basketball. As we move into the basketball season, exhibition game has a date set. But before we get too far into this, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at FanDuel. Summer sports, even as summer winds down for us teachers, are in full swing, and whether you're talk about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or some high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game match more exciting. You're already following all that action. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling with FanDuel? Get in on the game while your friends are out getting sunburned on the beach. I like how simple and easy it is to use the FanDuel app. I like the quick payouts. I like the in-game action. Like as soon as games have started, you're not out of the game as far as the FanDuel goes, because things keep happening as the game keeps going. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers bet just $5, get $150 back in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today, or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Far Ranger, the Locked On Coogs here. Talking about Houston Cougar basketball getting started, we officially on Thursday were told about the exhibition opener, October 26th at the Fort Bend Epicenter. Houston will be one of 4 teams participating in an exhibition to open up the season. Game 1, I say game 1 because they don't have to count on your resume or anything. They're exhibition games. But game 1 that we played out like a normal game with referees and the whole nine will be between Arizona State and Texas A&M. Texas A&M is going to look a lot different without Buzz there, but that's going to be a little bit of a fun one to get there. It's a fun ticket. The second game is Houston versus Mississippi State. The Houston Cougars get the Mississippi State, I would say the Hail States, but get Mississippi State out of the SEC to open up exhibition season. A little bit different look for them. This is exhibition on October 26th, the Fort Bend Epicenter. It looks like in online, I hadn't been to the Fort Bend Epicenter, but they seat anywhere between 8,600 and 10,000 people. I'd imagine with Houston and A&M being there, that does get pretty sold out pretty quickly. Seats go on sale on the initial market on August 8th. And so be on the lookout for that. I also think it's worth pointing out that Arizona State fans travel, as will Mississippi State fans. So keep an eye on this. Now, Mississippi State, as far as, scouting this, we will talk about this going into it as we get closer, and I'll try and get the Locked On Mississippi State crew on. But interesting basketball program. Coach Chris Jans has been there for a few years now and has been fairly successful in a couple of years there. He was a long time build up to being a head coach, like nearly 30 years as an assistant before he got his first job in 2015 at Bowling Green. And then he took the New Mexico State head coaching job at 2017. He was in Wichita State, somewhere there in the middle as well. And then he took this Mississippi State job in 2022, and they've been in the tournament 3 times since he's been there. I should point out that while he was there, they also had at New Mexico State, they had made the tournament 3 times in 5 years. One of those 5 times, there was no tournament. That's a big accomplishment for New Mexico State in such a short window. In the 3 years he's been at Mississippi State, they've been in the tournament each year. Last year, they lost a close 8-9 matchup with Baylor. And Mississippi State should be getting used to Big 12 basketball because they'll see Iowa State, Kansas State, and Utah all in their non-conference slate this year. And so it'll be interesting to kind of see how Houston matches up with them and then transitive properly looking at how those individual matchups go as we go through the non-conference and get ready for Big 12 basketball as well. Now, Most of Mississippi State's roster is going to be new, which is not uncommon for people in this tier of college basketball trying to like elevate themselves out with the old and with the new. Bring in, I have down 4 incoming freshmen and 5 transfers, which is 9 people on a basketball roster. 2 of those freshmen to keep an eye on actually had Houston offers out of high school and are pretty talented kids to keep an eye on. King Grace. King Grace is from South Dallas. I guess both these kids are from South Dallas area. King Grace from Waxahachie went to Oak Cliff Faith Family. He is a long, athletic guard, jumps off the screen in terms of athleticism and motor. Very like not a whole lot of tricks in his bag, just kind of goes with the things that works offensively, but really, really big, athletic wing / guard. Cameron Paul is the other South Dallas guy from DeSoto. Both of these guys were 4 stars. Cameron Paul is just outside the top 10 in Texas in class of 2025. And I think, frankly, was kind of on Houston's radar before they realized we're going to have a shot at some of these big national prospects. And I think that's interesting that, anyway, Paul at DeSoto, both these kids are getting to play close to home to open up their college careers. It's pretty special. I also think, for what it's worth, if you're following recruiting trends, it indicates something about Jan's trying to stay in Texas with his recruiting. He recruited Texas kids in New Mexico State. He recruited Texas kids in Bowling Green. I think, it goes to show that you can't win in college basketball without Texas kids. Now, Brandon Walker is a transfer in there from Montana State. Brandon Walker comes from Montana State and had a handful of Power 5 offers in the portal for his final year of college basketball. Here he's like 6'7". He's listed 250. If you told me 260, I'd believe you. Big, strong. He's called a power forward, but plays kind of in the low post. He is also from Oak Cliff Faith Family High School. He's just a few years removed from that. Obviously, he's entering his last year of college eligibility. He's a new face on that roster. Keep an eye on Quincy Ballard, and looking up and down that roster is a guy that jumped off to me. He was a 6'11", 250-pound center, a big guy from Wichita State, but was at Florida State before that. He never got to play against Houston because of just where he was in the rotation his college career. When Houston played Wichita State in the American, they didn't overlap a whole lot, but he was a highly touted guy in the portal when he got to Mississippi State, committed to Mississippi State. So that's a really big, but the name to know for them is not a new guy actually as much as a returning guy, and that is Josh Hubbard. Josh Hubbard is a rising junior, 5'10" guard from Madison, Mississippi. He was initially committed to Ole Miss. Their coaching change happened where they got Chris Beard. He didn't want to go with the new coach after to go to Mississippi State. But Josh Hubbard had a Houston Cougar offer at a high school and would not shock you if he was a Houston Cougar. 5'10", not a giant, but guy plays a stupid hard, crazy high motor for a little guy, and is just all the floor, diving on it, and all that kind of stuff on defense. Offensively, as a freshman in the SEC, had 17.1 points per game. Last season as a sophomore at 18.9 points per game, was second team all SEC. He, like Milo Suzanne, went through the pre-draft process, trying to see what his NBA prospects were like, ultimately backed out to come back to Mississippi State for his junior season. He was invited to and was at the same Chris Paul, elite college point guards camp that Kingston Flemings was at as well a couple weeks ago. And he's really a highly sought after kid at a program that I don't think we think about as producing NBA. Yes, Monte Ellis went there and a handful of other NBA guys went to Mississippi State, but we maybe don't think of it as being this NBA caliber production factory or anything like that. I do think Chris Jans is a good coach. He's only been there a couple years. We'll see what kind of things he can do there. I do think they're the second tier program at State right now still, because I have a lot of respect for Beard. Whatever you think about Chris Beard as a person, he's a really good basketball coach. I know he and Sampson are close. They coach very similarly, and that's probably why I think so highly of Beard as a coach, honestly. But this is a good basketball program kind of on the rise, and it'll be an interesting exhibition. And what's going to be interesting is going to be how close this game is with Houston changing up some of the stuff they do. They obviously have a lot of new guys in their roster, but they've got this Hubbard kid that is just an electric scorer from all over the floor and kind of a one-man scoring machine whenever you need him, right? And I say whenever you need him because he can do the point guard thing as well. But whenever you need him, they got Josh Hubbard. And I think there's a chance that this, exhibition is close. And unfortunately, there'll be people that your buddies that aren't listening to Locked On Coogs like, why are we so close to Mississippi State? And they'll be really down in late October and early November about having a close exhibition to Mississippi State. And then I think we look up in January and this Mississippi State team's really good. And they're winning SEC games, and we're suddenly like, oh, maybe that tells us a lot more about where the program was at than we realized it was. It was a positive step, right? But we'll talk more about the Mississippi State scrimmage or exhibition, I guess I should say, itself as we get closer again. Tickets are on sale very, very soon. October 26th is the day of the matchups. Arizona State and A&M open up with the first game in Houston, and Mississippi State will be in that second one in the Fort Bend Epicenter. A cool event for sure, and really kind of an exciting way to kick off or tip off the basketball season, right? Not every day you get to play a Power 4 team with a pretty strong resume or a future pro on it. And getting to open the season like that is a pretty special thing. Now, speaking of special things, there's some Big 12 stuff going on yesterday, Thursday, and kind of going on, I guess, all summer long. And I want to think about, like, how we look at that as Houston Cougar fans before we get too far. Parker Andrews Locked On Coogs here. And the college sports news that took over on Thursday that kind of, I think, does have to do with Houston a little bit. It's kind of news I think most Houston Cougar fans would scoff at. Texas Tech landed another 5-star. This one time a 2026 kid out of Georgia by the name of Guyton. And I don't really want to talk about Guyton, his recruitment, that he's out of Georgia and Tech stole him from Georgia or whatever. That people assumed he was going to Georgia till Tech got involved. I don't know what the price tag on him is. Like the Ojo kid we heard of in the summer was $5 million or something. None of that really intrigues me as a Houston Cougar fan. And maybe it does you, and I'm sure that Chris Love and the guys Locked On Texas Tech doing a great job covering it. What's interesting to me is that Texas Tech's recruitment process, where they essentially just outbid everyone, has a lot of SEC fans up in a tizzy. And I've been trying to keep track of, and I can't keep track because it's all so crazy different every time, which Big 12 fans or which specifically Houston fans are big content kind of people are taking different angles on this and if they're on Tech's side or not. And it's complicated because Tech is a conference rival. And I would argue if you were building rivalries in the Big 12, there's a real argument that Texas Tech is Houston's biggest rival in the conference. It's an in-state public institution, old Southwest Conference school. Culturally, I mean, city of Houston, city of Lubbock, one side of the state to the other, rural surroundings, the biggest metroplex in the area, like all of those kinds of things, right? Stark rivalry and a lot of those contrasts. Totally get it, right? Totally get it. Also, what's worth, I'd argue that Tech has done less with more over the same window that Houston was doing more with less, right? And I get some of those contrasts as well. And I frankly think that's part of the reason I'm not super worried about the fact they keep landing these 5-stars. It's like there's a really good chance they still go 8-4, right? They in a post Leach world, they hadn't done better than that very often. And even with Mike Leach, and as much as I think very highly of Mike Leach as football coach, frankly, I love the just being off the wall and different and just bucking the norm and all that. They didn't have as much success with him as they should have either, right? But they land these 5-stars and they land these high-end kids. They've got a top kid in 2026, a top kid in 2027. They got eyes on another 2026 and eyes on a 28, and they've got these things set up, and they're just essentially outbidding folks with NIL money because they got a billionaire oil tycoon that played there and is willing to spend it. And I think it's funny that the SEC is all upset about this. And I kind of think that Houston should side with the Big 12. Houston people, for the interests of Houston, should side with the Big 12 people on this for a couple reasons. And I don't think people are. For one, I understand that's hard to root for a rival or whatever. But This is a Big 12 school claiming a seat at the table. It's the SEC and the Big 10 want to poo-poo this conference a lot and talk about how they're this and that. And the SEC and the Big 10 talk about the Big 12 at their media days, directly or indirectly, as far as like ranking the conferences, and that schedule's not like ours, and da-da-da-da-da, and we put the players in the pros, and we have the players. Well, now Big 12 schools are getting those players. Houston gets to put a fence around Houston and claim Keyshawn Henderson and Jaden Warren and Paris Melvin and all those kinds of things. BYU did their stuff. Utah's done their stuff. Tech is now doing their stuff. You can't say you had the players anymore. The Big 12 is doing that, right? I think that we should be cheering that on because that's debunking an argument the SEC's made as for why the Big 12 doesn't deserve more seats at the table. I also think it's for what it's worth. It's proof of concept. If you build it, they will come. And if you build it, it might be building out a bank account. But if you build it, they will come, right? Houston's building other things, the $160 million football facility and stuff like that. I also think it's worth pointing out that it creates a team that you can beat and kind of pound your chest about. So like if Houston gets to the point where they're beating Tech, it's like, look, they built this roster of 5 stars and we beat them. I think that puts a team with a bunch of 5 stars on your schedule in a way that you want, because you want to prove it on the football field. I also think, and this is, I don't think being talked about enough, and this is probably where I'll leave it, for whatever reason, the SEC schools, because of the big dollar amounts they throw around, are kind of the ones that have the most impact on the rules. They can shift the landscape by throwing a fit. We've seen that happen in the past. Wham, 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 I want my way. The NCAA does something about it, right? If you've got a problem with uncapped spending in NIL, if you've got a problem with whatever, I'm not pro salary caps. I think of it as a fairly capitalistic thing. Better players make more money. Players go where they want to make the most money. If money's not the most important thing to you, you might choose something else. Staying home, representing your city for whatever reason, right? If you don't like that system where the best players make the most money, and you want some caps on that or whatever, that only happens when those SEC schools and Big Ten schools get worried about someone taking that power from them, right? The same way, if you look at like any political sort of entity, when the people in power start to lose power, they're going to put rules up in place to make sure they hold on to whatever power they can. The SEC schools are upset about this. You've got coaches complaining about it. You've got fan bases irate. There are people saying that Congress needs to step in about what Texas doing, what Texas Tech is doing, in terms of like just outbidding folks at the last minute, right? And I don't know that I agree with that, but I do think that if you've got these gigantic institutions in terms of dollars and cents, ironically arguing that someone is outspending them for recruits and that needs to be stopped, as silly as that argument is, it feels like the first step in several towards doing something. So I feel like if you want change in college football in that instance, if you want the Big 12 to gain the respect that it deserves, if you want, frankly, the beat them on the field aspect of school like this to be on the field for you to go play and beat, I think there are lots of reasons to be pounding your chest saying Big 12, Big 12, Big 12, the same way the SEC has said SEC for so long now when these kinds of things happen. Now that's externally. Obviously, it's kind of stinks that they go to Tech or whatever. You got to play them a couple of times a year. Wish they would go to Houston. But ultimately, I do think that this is a good thing for the conference, and I think that it's a good thing for Houston because it's a good thing for the conference. I don't think it's got to be more complicated than that. And so when you see SEC fans or whatever at the workplace water cooler, or whatever, like, I can't believe Tech did this again. Like, Big 12 did it again, huh? And like, I think you could wear it as a badge of honor there, in those kind of instances. And I don't think it's crazy to discriminate or to be discriminate between what is a Big 12 win and what is a Houston win in that instance either, because truthfully, the SEC has been treating things like that for a long time. The SEC bottom dwellers will cheer on Alabama's dynasty as if they did something about it besides get run over. I don't know. I thought it was interesting to see so many Houston fans and content creation kind of accounts as well on the train of like, oh yeah, this tech thing's ridiculous. Like, no, it's kind of in our favor. Maybe I see things differently. Now, a couple things I do see. One, the trivia question from yesterday about how many players have been selected in the first round of the NFL draft. Answer that is 15 players in the first round of the NFL draft at the University of Houston. I had the first one I could find is Elmo Wright from 1971, wide receiver. Most recent being Peyton Turner in 2021. Tomorrow's trivia question will be answering on Monday at this point, I guess. We talked to some about the basketball season starting. Talked some about point guards. Fun matchup between Miles Usain and Josh Hubbard. So the question is, what is the program's single game assist record? The men's basketball program, Houston Cougars. What is the single game assist record, and do you know who holds it? We'll talk about that on Monday at the end of the day, at the end of the show that day as well. Locked On Coogs, primarily Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Go Coogs.